Hello and welcome to BioBiz Buzz, the podcast where we unpack the science, strategy, and the stories that are shaping the biopharma industry. I'm your host, Mike Ward, and today we're going to be focusing on one of the most closely watched stories in the infectious diseases, how we can really push innovation in HIV treatment and prevention. At this year's CROI meeting, Gilead presented late-breaking data that could mark the beginning of a new phase for HIV care. First, we heard full phase 3 results from the ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2 trials, which were evaluating an investigational single tablet regimen combining bictegravir, which is currently part of the world's leading HIV treatment regimen, with lenacapavir, which is Gilead's long-acting capsid inhibitor. And alongside that, we also saw new data from the PURPOSE program, which is looking twice yearly, years to go, for HIV prevention, a modality that's already started to reshape the PrEP market with its every 6-month dosing. Now, Gilead's guidance for 2026 explicitly calls out Yeztugo as a key growth driver, with expectations of a step change in revenue as prevention uptake actually builds, underlining the commercial and public health stakes behind these data. So what do the results actually tell us? Well, especially about the future standard of care for people living with HIV and about actually closing the persistent gaps in HIV prevention globally. To discuss that, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Jared Baeten. He's the Senior Vice President for Clinical Development and Head of the Virology Therapeutic Area at Gilead, and one of the architects of the PURPOSE Prevention Program. So, Jared, great to have you here, and welcome to BioBiz Buzz.
It's great to be here, Mike, and thanks for the introduction and for your enthusiasm. I'm really looking forward to talking.
Yeah, great. So I think we should sort of set the context. So let's start with the big picture. Jared, from your vantage point, why are the ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2 results, together with the PURPOSE prevention updates that you provided, why are they so important for the HIV field and for Gilead?
Yeah, and thanks for taking the big look first, because I think it's really important to say where we are in HIV first, for you and for your audience. You know, we're 45 years into the HIV epidemic, and HIV has always been a tremendous success story, especially these last 30 years, in the fight for innovation and the advocacy for innovation, and then how innovation can have impact on people's lives all around the world. And we are still at this point in HIV where the epidemic is not over. There are 1 million plus new infections all around the world every year, including every single country. And there are still individuals who are living with HIV who do not have their care fully optimized. And at Gilead, our vision statement has been that we would like nothing more than to not work on HIV at all, actually. That we make innovations in both prevention and in treatment, and leaning in, if we can get to a cure, we will be there to try to be able to make the biggest difference in people's lives to end this epidemic. This moment with the ARTISTRY data and the PURPOSE data and updated PURPOSE data reading this week are just another proof of concept moment for us, and part of the series of inflection points we've had in our HIV portfolio in the last few years as we lean in towards getting to rare kind of options that give people the choices in both treatment and prevention to be able to get to long-term success. I'm really looking forward to talking to you both about ARTISTRY and about PURPOSE, as well as the totality of Gilead's pipeline, because the conversation we're having today is hopefully another one that we can have in a year and a year from now and a year from now as we march towards being part of ending the epidemic.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The fact that HIV is, in many respects, what has already been achieved is a sort of great testament to the sort of work that the biotech industry has been able to conduct. And also, I was interested in your point about how you were saying that actually you would like not to be in the HIV sector. I remember the great work that Gilead did in hepatitis C. So you kind of got a track record there. But could you walk us through ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2? Who was enrolled and what questions were you actually trying to answer, and how were the studies set up?
Yeah. So ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2 are phase 3 registrational trials of a combination of two antiretroviral agents, two anti-HIV agents. Bictegravir, and you mentioned these at the beginning, bictegravir, which is part of Gilead's combination Biktarvy, that is the most widely used medication here in the United States for the treatment of HIV, where I'm sitting, and brings with that a mechanism of action, integrase transfer inhibitor that's working on HIV that is proven and potent, and then the confidence in that agent, which has been commercialized now for a number of years. Combines bictegravir with lenacapavir. First in class, highly potent, new mechanism of action inhibitor of the HIV capsid. Lenacapavir has gotten a lot of attention these last few years because of the tremendous scientific jump that was made to be able to develop an active agent against the capsid, and then its ability to be used both in HIV treatment and prevention and across a wide range of dosing intervals, from daily, as in the ARTISTRY studies, all the way to a daily pill in the ARTISTRY studies, all the way to a 6-month injection in the PURPOSE studies for HIV prevention. So ARTISTRY 1 tested this combination, a once-a-day, single-tablet combination of bictegravir and lenacapavir for treatment of HIV in individuals who had been treated with other regimens before and who could switch to this regimen. The two different trials tested two interlocking but distinct populations. ARTISTRY 1 was among individuals who, in spite of all of the innovations that have been made in HIV treatment, were not at that point able to take a single tablet regimen for HIV. One of the things that's really important for HIV has been for 20 years now that combining medicines that are necessary for HIV treatment into one tablet that people can take once a day improves adherence, improves persistence, and as a result, can result in better clinical outcomes. All the things that you want from HIV, turning down the virus replication to be able to have sustained long-term health. But there are some people who, because of antiviral resistance from their past history of treatments that did not completely work well, or medication intolerance or other reasons, could not take a single tablet regimen. Those are the individuals who enrolled in ARTISTRY 1. ARTISTRY 2 was another phase 3 randomized trial, but enrolled individuals who were stable on Biktarvy, a medicine that's a guidelines recommended around the world, gold standard treatment for HIV, and randomized individuals to stay on that or to switch to this new combination of Biktarvy. In both studies, what we were aiming to understand is the efficacy and the safety of this new combination that could offer an option for people to have a new daily therapy, bringing together these two really established medicines for HIV.
Okay, so what can you sort of say about the specific efficacy signals that you've been seeing with this combination, and in particular, what you learned about resistance?
Yeah. So really importantly, for HIV therapies, the efficacy is the first measure, right? Which is how well the medicine turns off the virus so that the virus levels in the blood are undetectable. And the nature of HIV treatment these days is that the bar has gotten very high, which is fantastic. So most people living with HIV can take a single tablet regimen or a combination of medicines and be able to achieve viral suppression now. So we had to meet that bar, and we did. So both of the trials met the primary endpoint with comparable viral suppression results in the big randomized group compared to the comparator regimen groups, and both the two different regimen options that were in ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2. That was great news. And the suppression rates were absolutely in line with what clinicians expect from modern, from contemporary, from highly effective contemporary antiretroviral therapy. Then, on top of that, bar for efficacy is high, the bar for safety is high as well. It's really important that new medicines for the treatment of HIV are safe and well tolerated. And in both ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2, we found that Biclen was. This combination of bictegravir and lenacapavir was well tolerated in both of the trials across a really wide diversity of population, both in terms of age and geography, as well as gender. And there were no new safety signals for this combination compared to what we already know, which is an extensive amount of information about bictegravir and lenacapavir. And then on top of that, viral failure and resistance. So both of these agents individually and together are highly potent and set up a high bar for resistance. So there was very low rates of virologic failure and then consequently resistance in the trial, reinforcing the idea that this combination is both a potent and a strong option for people to consider.
Okay, and I mean, if we sort of think about the sort of the most important people in this are those people living with HIV. So clinically, where do you see the single tablet combo fitting in if it is approved? Is it primarily for people on complex salvage regimens, or do you expect actually broader use in the routine switch market?
Yeah, the nature of the ARTISTRY program is it set out to answer the question of BIC/LEN as a switch option for a really broad population of people. I mentioned before that the age of the ARTISTRY trials is broad, the geographic and gender, race, and ethnicity representation is broad, and it was kind of across the spectrum of this switch population, from individuals who are stable on a guidelines recommended once a day therapy, all the way to individuals who are on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pills a day for treatment of HIV. And we did that in part because we think our job is to make options that are responding to the needs of people living with HIV so that they can figure out if this choice is going to be right for them. So if approved, this combination of BIC/LEN can address across that spectrum. From, on that one side, individuals who can't take one pill a day right now and instead take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, et cetera, to be able to optimize their therapy down to one pill a day would be transformative. And actually, that's one of the secondary findings of the trial, was also just how meaningful it was to many of those patients to not have to take a couple or a handful of pills a day. And then all the way to the other side of things is individuals who may be taking a guidelines recommended therapy now, but are interested in switching because of the variety of reasons that people might switch, including wanting to respond to what has always been really important with HIV, which has been the importance of innovation. So people respond to innovation and the ability of a new mechanism, a new combination to bring something new for them.
Right. Now, you already sort of mentioned earlier on sort of safety and tolerability being sort of broadly consistent with individual components, but adherence has always remained a sort of a cornerstone of HIV care. So did ARTISTRY 1 and 2 give you sort of any insight into how people living with HIV experience the combo, in terms of convenience or quality of life?
This question is really meaningful to me and really underlies why we do the work we do. We make new medicines for HIV treatment or for prevention, not because we can make medicines. That's the intermediate step, as great as an achievement as it can be. We make medicines and so they make a difference in people's lives. And that means making medicines that people take and take for the long term with adherence, with persistence, and that they believe in so that they continue to take them so that they get the clinical benefits as a result. We collected this kind of data and we built this combination to respond to that. We built this combination of bictegravir and lenacapavir to respond to those needs. So there was very high on-treatment persistence and low discontinuation rates in both trials, both ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2, which really suggests that this regimen fits well into people's lives. Beyond that, in ARTISTRY 1, which was an unblinded trial, so people knew if they were taking BIC/LEN or if they were taking their old, more complex regimen, we collected very specifically patient-reported outcome data on treatment satisfaction. And the treatment satisfaction data, obviously comparable at baseline between the two groups before people started the new BIC/LEN combination, and improved in people who were taking BIC/LEN and didn't change at all for people who stayed on their old regimen. That's really important because that is objective data to us that people responded, not responded virologically, but responded themselves to what this combination can provide for them. And then on top of that, we're, of course, continuing to collect more information as we continue to follow people in these trials, because we're really committed to following people and switching more people in the trials over to the option for BIC/LEN so that we can understand the long-term safety and efficacy.
Okay, so in terms of next steps, what's the regulatory and sort of potential launch timeline, and how important is that launch going to be, both in, I guess, the context of Gilead's broader HIV strategy?
Yeah, so the regulatory filing for this combination therapeutic len is poised, and we have stated publicly that we are planning on a potential FDA decision and launch in the second half of this year in 2026. And of course, that's part of global regulatory strategy as we generally pursue for HIV therapies. That would be, I just want to flag where this fits into the larger scheme, because you asked in terms of Gilead's larger, broader HIV strategy. We have anticipated 7 potential HIV launches between now and 2033. So 7 launches over the next 7 years for treatment and prevention of HIV. All of those are grounded in lenacapavir, which has already, of course, been launched for HIV prevention this last year. These 7 new launches are all grounded in prevention, are grounded in lenacapavir either for prevention or for HIV treatment, bringing new options to people so we can really address the needs of people living with HIV or people who want HIV prevention.
Right. So let's turn to prevention. The PURPOSE program, that's already supported the initial approval and US launch of the twice yearly lenacapavir for PrEP, which you guys market as Yes2Go in the US. What were the key questions in the newly announced PURPOSE data? What were they designed to answer?
Yeah. So the PURPOSE trials were phase 3 randomized double-blind trials of lenacapavir for the prevention of HIV, tested in 8,000 plus individuals with truly the widest geographic, racial, ethnic, gender, age spread ever done for a prevention program. Because we really wanted lenacapavir for HIV prevention to reflect the diversity of people who need HIV prevention, who want new prevention options, and for whom current prevention options just weren't cutting it. So that program had primary results that read out in 2024 with really unprecedented efficacy for HIV prevention in the PURPOSE 1 and PURPOSE 2 trials in their primary endpoints. And those became the basis of regulatory filings that have now approval in the United States in the middle of last year. But I'm really proud to say we have had regulatory interactions across 6 continents during 2025, including approvals in Europe, Australia, and in 10 plus countries in Africa now. All of that testifies to the global impact that lenacapavir could have for HIV prevention. At CROI this year, the results that have read out are updates on the PURPOSE trials. The PURPOSE trials are continuing to go on. So once the primary readout happened, participants, because we are committed to the prevention health of people who had volunteered for the trials, because we're committed to collecting all the right additional information on persistent use and long-term use, everybody in the trials was offered to continue in the trials. And what the updated information on was here presented at CROI was the information between when the primary studies had their data cut and the moment where everybody was offered additional time and open label lenacapavir for HIV prevention. Now, because these studies are huge, thousands of people, it's actually many hundreds plus additional person years of safety information as well as efficacy information. So it's really important for the field to continue to get that information out there to talk about the safety and the efficacy of this new prevention agent. Happy to say that the key findings were that the efficacy and the safety in this additional information mirrored exactly what had been seen in the trials before, that lenacapavir was highly effective for HIV prevention, remained highly effective for HIV prevention with this additional data, just like it was with the earlier data, and that the safety profile remained really well tolerable, particularly the importance of a well-tolerated, safe agent for what is otherwise healthy individuals.
Right, yeah. Now, you've had several months of real-world experience with Yes2Go in the US. What have you learned from that launch that helps interpret the PURPOSE data, particularly around who's using the drug and actually how easy it has been to integrate it into clinical practice?
Yeah. And thanks on that. I think the U.S. was the first place to launch lenacapavir as Yes2Go. And the U.S. launch so far, we really are viewing as a true success. And that's not just our view, that's also been an external view for external commentators on seeing where we're going. Part of that has been strong execution of payer access in the United States, where we've achieved by the end of last year 90% of coverage of person lives, as well as for 90+% of those individuals facing a zero copay. Incredibly important to get those insurance coverage barriers and then to break down the barriers so that individuals are able to access lenacapavir as Yez2Go quickly and easily. What we've also seen is that the uptake so far includes both people switching off of prior forms of PrEP, as well as individuals who previously weren't on PrEP. And that's really encouraging. And I think we were hoping for both of those. We certainly were expecting the former, that for somebody who's already been practiced with taking PrEP and a new option is offered, particularly ones that offers every 6-month dosing as opposed to something more frequent, that someone might jump on that. But to see new individuals taking up PrEP, I think is extremely meaningful, because one of the driving reasons that we made Yez2Go is to be able to expand PrEP options so that new people could find a prevention option that worked for them, because that's how we actually are going to end HIV, is being able to cover enough people with options that fit into their lives. And then in the implementation, we're simultaneously working through the mechanics of how to implement lenacapavir as Yez2Go in people's clinics. And that includes the scheduling, the clinic workflows, the adoption of prior authorizations or buy and build strategies that people may sometimes need to navigate. But that's why we're seeing and guiding to a steady, durable ramp. And that what we saw in the second half of 2025 and what we're seeing already in 2026 is speaking to that. So the first weeks of 2026 are speaking to that.
Yeah, what's interesting, you're talking there about patient access. Now, one of the things about HIV, it is a global epidemic. And in high-income countries, it's a challenge. But in some of the lower income, medium income countries, it's even worse. Now, what I noted was the first doses of lenacapavir for HIV prevention were actually delivered in sub-Saharan Africa within the same year as the US launch. So I think it's the first time that that's actually happened for an HIV agent. So what is sort of Gilead thinking about global access, especially in regions that bear a disproportionate burden of the disease?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're talking about this point. And I pause for a second because I got a catch in my throat every time I start talking about this, because I've worked on HIV my whole career, 30 years now, and worked in HIV globally. So I did HIV care and research in East and Southern Africa, as well as in the United States. And both of those have been part of my life the entire time. And to be able to see last year that lenacapavir for PrEP was delivered in African countries in 2025, the same year it was delivered in the United States, a high-income country, I barely have words for it. And other than to say what you said before, which is this has never been done before. And that commitment to doing something that hasn't been done before flows through everything that we do at Gilead and HIV. And that's in the science. The exemplar of that is the novelty of lenacapavir targeting HIV capsid. And we have that same drive for innovation for doing what's never been done before in work on access as well. And so for lenacapavir for PrEP, we got the readouts from the studies and immediately signed voluntary license agreements with 6 generic manufacturers with no royalties to get back to Gilead, so that they can make lenacapavir for PrEP for 120 low and lower middle income countries as quickly as possible. We did the technology transfer so that they could understand the mechanics of making lenacapavir. We did the technology transfer even before we filed for regulatory approval in the United States. All of those companies are working aggressively to be able to do their own lenacapavir launches as quickly as possible, and we're hoping actually in the pretty near future. And in the meantime, we manufactured 2 million persons worth of lenacapavir and worked with the Global Fund and with PEPFAR to be able to provide that drug to countries in low and lower middle income countries in Africa and Asia. And we're not done because I mentioned before, we have regulatory approvals, we have regulatory interactions and approvals across 6 continents. And every single week, I'm having more discussions about expanding the number of places in the world where lenacapavir can be approved, available, and having impact.
Yeah, Dan, that's great news. You and your colleagues need to be applauded for that. So well done. I want to sort of just switch to next generation prevention. So you talked about purpose, but you've also launched a phase 3 study that's called Purpose 365, which is looking at an investigational once yearly injectable formulation of lenacapavir for PrEP. How does that program build on, for example, what you presented at CROI, and what would success look like there?
Yeah. So Purpose 365 is the name of the phase 3 trial of a 12-month formulation of lenacapavir for PrEP. So the current Yes2Go is a 6-month formulation, huge step change itself for HIV prevention. And we thought, could we go even further? And we've now made a formulation that we think will last for 12 months. The phase 3 trial is ongoing now. We expect to be able to talk about it, have an update next year, and looking towards market in 2028. That would complement, extend, and hopefully extend the population of people interested in PrEP beyond even what we're going to achieve with the 6-month formulation. And that's really meaningful to us to think about what lenacapavir twice a year and then lenacapavir once a year could offer to the world, because many of us can come into contact with the health system once a year, and to be able to have one singular moment to think about HIV prevention would be incredibly meaningful and impactful for individuals and for health systems all over the world.
Okay, and so on the treatment side, I mean, you're developing it in sort of, lenacapavir in weekly and twice yearly regimens, including other combinations. How do the ARTISTRY results feed into your confidence in the longer acting treatment strategy?
Yeah, so lenacapavir for us is a foundation for HIV treatment and prevention options. Making options that fit into people's lives so that they can make the choice of what's going to work for them for treatment and prevention. For treatment, that means lenacapavir in combination with other things to achieve a fully encompassed treatment regimen, and giving people options that could be once a day or a pill once a week, leaning in if we can to be able to get to a pill once a month, or injections that might be, for example, twice a year. We've got programs that are hitting each of those spaces. Pills daily or weekly or leaning in towards monthly, injections that are multiple months, aiming for twice a year. Those combinations with lenacapavir foundation and other agents together are part of that entire strategy, trying to get as many options that are going to be able to meet the needs of people living with HIV. All grounded in Len. Yeah.
So as you sort of build out this portfolio of less frequent options, how do you sort of see the role of that daily oral therapy evolving? Does it ultimately shrink to a niche, or will it still remain a mainstay of treatment?
Yeah, I think we've done and we continue to do extensive market research as well as clinical experience and direct experience talking to users and patients and providers. What an ideal world would look like would be a hybrid, a mosaic, where some people will continue to prefer a daily therapy. And they will do so because it is familiar, because it matches what other medicines they're taking, because it gives them confidence to do something every day and the routinization of that. Other people would want something longer acting. For some, that might be a pill, and for some, that might be a shot. And that's true in actually both treatment and prevention. We have in prevention, while at the same time that we're aiming to push lenacapavir scientifically to maybe aim at once a year, we also remind all the time that there are once a day therapies for HIV prevention that for many people give them the confidence to be able to pick the choice that they want for prevention. So daily fits in a long-acting world. Long-acting in both treatment and prevention extends the transformation, extends the impact that we can have.
Right. I mean, obviously, while you're sort of pushing the boundaries on innovation, you're still operating in a sort of a tougher pricing policy environment, particularly in the US. So how do you balance, sustained investment in HIV R&D with pressures like Medicare Part D redesign or Medicaid pricing agreements? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we have faced and absorbed significant policy-related headwinds, including Part D redesign in 2025, and then ACA-related pricing impacts that in this year, in 2026. And yet, we're still guiding to base business growth, including growth within our HIV franchise, which is obviously core to so much of what we do. We focus on diversification of our portfolio within HIV, within our other work in virology, and across everything else we're doing. That diversification will sustain the great work that we're able to do in HIV well into the 20s, 30s, even in the face of headwind pressure. And I just want to emphasize, even when there are headwinds, we simultaneously address those through innovation, and we simultaneously address those through access, because access initiatives, whether they be zero copays, like I mentioned before, with payers in the United States for years to go, or global access and global tiered pricing, like we talked about for some of the tremendous work for lenacapavir for PrEP this last year, all of that are core to our mission. So it is innovation, it is access, and it is doing all of that together so that we get to the impact that we want.
Right. As we draw this both fascinating and inspiring discussion to a close, for the clinicians or people living with HIV or individuals considering PrEP, for example, who have been following CROI, what are the one or two messages that you most hope they would actually be able to take away from the ARTISTRY and purpose presentations at the meeting?
Yeah. So for people living with HIV, the treatment toolbox continues to expand, and the focus is on options that hit into people's lives in meaningful ways, getting to reducing complexity, improving adherence and persistence, and fitting into people's lives so that people can have long-term success with their HIV treatment because of medicines that are highly efficacious, high barrier to resistance, and tolerated. So continued expansion of the toolbox to try to make sure everybody's got the options that are going to work for them in the long term. Similarly, for people interested in PrEP, prevention is becoming more compatible with people's lives and I want people to be able to see themselves in the science for prevention, whether from wherever they are in the world or whoever they are as a person, because prevention options speak to everyone. So the twice yearly injections that were tested in the Purpose program are available now in different settings across this country and across the world. And we will continue to make prevention options so that more people can be able to find prevention success. And then for clinicians and for policymakers, it is thinking about options so that people can get to the choices that they want and be able to offer people those choices. And to remember that we need these choices as citizens of countries and citizens of the world. We need these choices so that we can get to the goal that we all want, which is fewer new infections and ending this epidemic.
Yeah. So, Jared, very consequential for both HIV treatment and prevention. We'll obviously be watching very closely as the full ARTISTRY 1 and ARTISTRY 2 data emerge, and as the Purpose program continues to show or shape how we think about long-acting PrEP in both high-income and low-income, high-burden settings. To our listeners, you can find more details on Gilead's HIV pipeline and upcoming catalysts in the show notes. So again, Jared, thanks very much for your time. I'm Mike Ward. This is BioBiz Buzz. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we explore the next wave of innovation in biopharma.